Welcome back to Tethered and Whole. My name is Matt. I'm the host here on this podcast. And I've always said that curiosity might be the most underrated of all the SEL strategies. We hear talk about resilience, we hear about boundaries, we talk about habits and agency, but curiosity, I feel like it kind of slips into the background. And yet, if you look closely, you'll find it threaded as a viable strategy through almost every concept we've discussed on this podcast. It's the antidote to defensiveness. It's the antidote to uncertainty. It's the antidote to fear. I was listening to another podcast recently, and where the guest was Adam Grant, and he was talking about how curiosity improves both judgment and decision making. He says judgments are really just hypotheses, and decisions are like experiments. So let's just think about that. Let's play with that for a bit. When we make a judgment about someone, about a situation, maybe about a policy, about a post on social media even, we are forming a hypothesis based on the data available to us. And that data is limited, it's filtered, and it's often biased. And then our actions, those are experiments based on that hypothesis. The wisest researchers, whether in a lab or in life, they remain open to adjusting their hypothesis when new data emerges. They don't cling to being right. They cling to discovering what's true. So let's explore some examples. Imagine a high school principal who notices that a veteran teacher, let's call him Mr. Daniels, has been closing his classroom door more often, and he's been skipping optional committee meetings. The principal forms a quick judgment. He's disengaged. He's resistant to change. He's checking out before retirement. Based on the evidence, that judgment feels solid, but it's actually just a hypothesis based on limited data. A closed door, missed meetings, and a quieter presence in staff discussions. So now comes the experiment. If the principal treats that hypothesis as fact, her actions might look like this. She schedules a formal observation with a critical lens, sends maybe pointed emails about collaboration, or excludes him from leadership opportunities. These actions are experiments built on the assumption that he's disengaged. And what data will those actions likely produce? Defensiveness, withdrawal, confirmation of the original belief. But what if she treats her judgment as a hypothesis instead of a verdict? She could design a different experiment. Say, instead of confrontation, she leads with curiosity. Hey, I've noticed you've been keeping your door closed more lately, and I just wanted to check in. How are things going for you this semester? New data now emerges. Mr. Daniel shares that his wife has started chemotherapy treatments, and he's using his planning period to coordinate medical appointments. The closed door isn't disengagement. It's containment. It's survival. Same observation, two different hypotheses, two very different experiments, and two completely different outcomes. In schools, we do this all the time with students too. So let's find an example at the student level. Let's say a middle school teacher notices a student putting his head down every afternoon during math. The hypothesis? Lazy, unmotivated, doesn't care. The experiment? Public redirection of his behavior, lowered participation grades, a call home framed around effort. What if the hypothesis shifts? What if it becomes something is interfering with his ability to engage? The experiment changes and a quiet check-in ensues, a schedule review perhaps, a conversation with a counselor, and suddenly we learn he's working until midnight helping his family with their restaurant. Our judgments feel like truth, but in fact, they're drafts. And every action we take is testing the draft that we've written. The question isn't whether we'll form hypothesis. We always do. The question is, are we willing to revise our hypotheses when the data changes? That, friends, that's where curiosity lies. Scientists are curious by nature. The whole point of earning a PhD is to learn how to test your thinking, to challenge your assumptions, and to design experiments that reveal what is valid rather than what is convenient. I learned that lesson early. In 1990, I began a graduate degree in ornamental horticulture at the University of Florida. My advisor was interested in tissue culture of aquatic plants, propagating native species at scale for wetland reclamation. Noble work, 100%. My goals were slightly less altruistic. I wanted bigger, more colorful water lilies for a potential commercial market. We both wanted to figure out how to grow these plants in sterile lab conditions, these plants that are normally growing in swampy, bacteria-filled muck. I was fascinated by chromosome doubling, how increasing chromosome numbers could make flowers larger, more vibrant, more robust. Here's what I learned in that lab. Curiosity requires humility. You walk into an experiment thinking you know what should happen, and then the data humbles you. Plant doesn't respond, the tissue contaminates, the growth pattern surprises you, and you have a choice. You can defend your original idea, or you can get curious about what the results are trying to teach you. What story is emerging from the numbers? Now, we can wonder about all sorts of things, and wonder is beautiful. Wonder is that sense of amazement or admiration when something is unexpected or stunning. But curiosity is different. Curiosity is more active. It's the desire to learn more. And when we leverage curiosity as a skill, especially in relationships, it must be sincere. Otherwise, it becomes sharp. Why would you think that? Can sound like a question, but it's really an accusation wearing a question mark. Curiosity doesn't mean letting someone run you over. It means you are genuinely interested in mutual understanding. Imagine a middle school teacher, Ms. Rivera, meeting with an upset parent about a failing grade. The email beforehand was strongly worded. She could walk into that meeting defensive, armed with explanations and rebuttals. Instead, she prepares differently. Before the meeting, she identifies her assumptions. I'm assuming he's going to be aggressive. She notices her own hot buttons. Grading fairness is tied to her professional identity. So she clarifies her goals, explain the rubric, hear the parent's perspective, create a path forward for the student. She defines success. The parent leaves understanding the criteria and feeling heard. She even imagines a neutral third-party observer watching the conversation. Then, during the meeting, she leads with inquiry. Hey, I'd like to hear more about how your daughter experienced this project. She listens to understand rather than listening to respond. She names the emotions in the room. I can hear how frustrated you both feel. And with that, something shifts. The conversation moves from combative to collaborative. Curiosity, not defensiveness, changes the tone. Folks, here's the truth. Curiosity lowers the temperature in the room. Curiosity disarms ego. And curiosity reminds us that our first reaction is rarely our fullest understanding. When we get curious instead of certain, we trade the need to win for the opportunity to learn. And in that space between judgment and understanding, relationships are preserved, solutions are born, and growth becomes possible. Curiosity is powerful in conversations with others, but it may be even more powerful in conversations with ourselves. What if? What if instead of approaching life with fear or judgment, we approached it with curiosity? What if your self-care practice wasn't about achieving a number on a scale or a pace on a watch, but about wondering how your body responds to movement today? What if, in a difficult interaction, you asked a question before making a statement? What if, before heading into the least favorite part of the holidays, maybe you asked yourself, is there another way that this could look? And remember, too, that curiosity is not passive. Curiosity is courageous. It requires slowing down. It requires noticing your immediate judgment and gently setting it aside. So the next time you come across something on social media that you strongly disagree with, and you feel that immediately tightening in your chest and that flash of certainty, pause. Instead of reinforcing your existing narrative, ask yourself, why is this a truth for some people and not for me? What experiences, data, fears, or values might be shaping their view? You don't have to agree, but you can seek to understand. Because, folks, here's what I've learned over time. The opposite of tethered is not disagreement, it's rigidity. It's the unwillingness to test your own hypotheses. Curiosity keeps us tethered. It keeps us tethered to growth, to teach each other, to humility, and to possibility. And maybe that's why it's the most underrated strategy of all. Thanks for joining me this week on Tethered and Whole, and I'll see you next time.